I'm 29, and I've been with my boyfriend, Ryan, for 6 years. We live in this quiet little town, tucked into the edge of a forest. It's the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and wave at each other every morning. Idyllic, really. Or at least it seemed that way until last month, when I found something I wasn't meant to see. Ryan inherited his grandmother's house after she passed. It's this creaky old place with heavy wallpaper, narrow hallways, and a weird draft that never seems to go away. He moved in a few months before me, and ever since I arrived, I've been feeling like something's off. At first, it was little things. The way the lights in the kitchen flicker no matter how many times we call an electrician. The scratching sounds behind the walls. Ryan always brushed it off, said the house was old, it settles. I tried to believe him. I told myself it was just my anxiety acting up again. But it didn't stop. Then, one rainy afternoon while Ryan was at work, I went down to the basement to grab an old space heater. I'd never really spent time down there before. It smelled musty and damp, and the stairs felt like they could collapse under me at any second. But as I was looking through some of the storage bins, I noticed a wooden box shoved behind an old dresser. It was locked. Not with a padlock, but one of those antique latches, almost decorative. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except it had my name written on a piece of masking tape across the top. My name. In Ryan's handwriting. I froze. I couldn't even touch it at first. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echo in the cold silence of the basement. I stared at that box for maybe 10 full minutes before I finally reached out and pulled it toward me. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not yet. But that was the moment everything started to unravel. I waited until Ryan got home that evening. I didn't say anything right away. Just watched him move around the kitchen, humming to himself, completely unaware that I'd stumbled across something that changed how I saw everything. He poured us wine, kissed my cheek, made small talk about work. Everything was normal, so painfully normal. That night, when he fell asleep, I crept back down into the basement with a flashlight. I brought a small screwdriver with me. The latch wasn't hard to break. I figured if he ever noticed, I'd say it was already broken when I found it. The lid creaked open, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. It was a collection. A collage of sorts, photos of me. Some from social media, but others were different. Candid shots. Pictures I had no idea were ever taken. Me walking to my car. Me at work. Me at the grocery store. Some of them were printed, others developed from film. At the bottom of the box were items that felt deeply personal. An old hairbrush I'd lost in college. A ring I thought I'd misplaced years ago. Even the wrapper from a note I left him during our second year of dating, something I had completely forgotten about. I sat on the cold floor for a long time, just staring. Not crying. Not panicking. Just frozen. The next morning, I confronted him. I held up the hairbrush first, asked where he got it. He barely blinked. Said he found it in a box of my stuff when we moved in. He didn't even ask why I was in the basement, or how I found it. Then I mentioned the photos. That's when he paused. Just for a second. But it was enough. He laughed it off after. Said it was part of a surprise he was planning. That he wanted to make a scrapbook of our relationship. That he was collecting memories and wanted to give it to me for our anniversary. He had every answer ready. His voice didn't shake. His eyes never left mine. But here's the thing. Ryan has never been the sentimental type. He didn't even remember our last anniversary until I reminded him. Now suddenly he's crafting a secret photo collection of our entire relationship? Digging through my past and keeping it all in a locked box labeled with my name? No. Something didn't add up. I didn't say that, though. I just nodded. Pretended to believe him. I kissed him on the cheek, told him it was sweet. But deep down, I knew, I wasn't just living with a liar. I was living with a stranger. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house made my skin crawl. The creak of the hallway, the whir of the fridge, even the wind brushing against the windows, it all felt too loud, too sharp. Ryan slept beside me like nothing was wrong, his breathing steady, peaceful. I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between the clicks of the heater, trying not to let my mind spiral. But it did anyway. Around 3 a.m., I slipped out of bed and went back to the basement. I told myself I just needed to look at the box again, make sure I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't losing my mind. Except the box was gone. The spot behind the dresser where I'd found it was empty. Like it had never been there at all. My stomach dropped. I started tearing through the basement, opening every plastic bin, every suitcase, even the cardboard boxes labeled Christmas and tools. Nothing. That's when I noticed something strange. A part of the wooden floor near the back corner was cleaner than the rest. Not newer, just less dusty. I bent down, brushed it off, and found a small metal ring embedded in the wood. A trapdoor. It creaked open like something from a horror movie, slow, groaning, reluctant. The space below was shallow, more of a crawl space, really. I had to get on my stomach to reach inside, heart pounding so loud it echoed off the walls. And there it was. Another box. This one wasn't labeled with my name. It didn't need to be. Because the second I opened it, I knew it wasn't about me. It was about someone else. Inside were different photos, of a woman I didn't recognize. A little older than me. Maybe in her early 30s. Same style of photos, walking on the street, sipping coffee at a cafe, waiting at a bus stop. Her face was in almost every shot. There was a charm bracelet, a concert ticket stub, and a key, one of those old skeleton keys, heavy and rusted. And at the bottom, a newspaper clipping. It was yellowed and folded carefully, like it had been read 100 times. Local woman reported missing, last seen near Forest Lane. The date on it? 3 years before Ryan and I met. I didn't take the box upstairs. I put everything back exactly as I found it, sealed the trapdoor, and dusted off the ring. Then I stood there in the dark for a long time, asking myself one question. Who the hell is the man I'm living with? I spent the next 2 days acting like everything was normal. Smiling when Ryan made coffee, nodding along when he asked how my work calls went, laughing at his dry jokes during dinner. It felt like playing a role in someone else's life, a life that had started to feel more like a trap. But every second, my mind kept circling back to that woman. The missing woman. Who was she to Ryan? A stranger? An ex? A secret? Was she someone he tried to save, or someone he tried to forget? I needed to know more. But I had to be careful. If he knew I'd gone back into that crawl space, I didn't know what he might do. So I waited until he left for work one morning, then went back down and opened the second box again. This time, I pulled out the newspaper clipping and read it slowly, line by line. Her name was Leah Vaughn. She went missing in late autumn, 3 years before I met Ryan. No signs of foul play, no forced entry at her home. She just vanished. Last seen walking home from her job at a local florist. A quiet, polite woman, according to her neighbors. She lived alone. No close family nearby. And here's what made my chest tighten. The florist she worked at? It was in the same town Ryan and I live in now. The same florist where Ryan buys me flowers every single month, always the same kind, white tulips. I didn't know what to make of that. I searched her name online. Not much came up. Just a few missing persons listings and a cold case forum where people speculated she'd either left town or been abducted. Her case had no real traction. No leads. It had gone cold less than 6 months after she disappeared. But on one of the posts, someone had uploaded a picture of her. A different one than the surveillance stills. And that's when it hit me. I had seen her before. Not just in the box, but once, months ago. In a framed photo that sat for a short time on Ryan's desk when we first moved in. He said it was his cousin. That she died in a car accident. That photo was gone now. I hadn't noticed when exactly, but it had disappeared quietly, just like Leah. I felt sick. Because now I had a name. And a lie. And a boyfriend who was hiding both. I started watching him. Not in a creepy way, at least, that's what I told myself. But every movement, every pause, every time he stepped out of a room, I paid attention. And the more I watched, the more patterns I saw. Every Thursday, Ryan left work early. He said it was for inventory checks at his office. I never questioned it before. But last Thursday, I followed him. He didn't go to his office. He drove 20 minutes out of town and parked in front of an abandoned cabin on the edge of the woods. Just sat in the car for 15 minutes, staring at the place like it was haunting him. Then he got out, walked around to the back, and disappeared inside. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. When he didn't come back out, I left. I didn't want to risk him seeing me. But something about that cabin stayed lodged in my mind like a splinter. That night, while Ryan was in the shower, I went to his study. There's a desk in there he never lets me use. Says it's for important documents. The bottom drawer is always locked. Except this time, it wasn't. The key was still in the lock. Careless. Or maybe he never imagined I'd look. Inside was a leather-bound journal. It wasn't his handwriting. The first page had Leah Vaughn's name scribbled across the top. The entries weren't dated, but they were written like a diary, fragmented thoughts, lists, fears. The tone changed over time, growing more disjointed, more desperate. And then, nothing. Halfway through the journal, the entries stopped. The rest of the pages were blank. But someone, maybe Ryan, had placed a pressed tulip between the last written page and the next. A white one. I didn't take the journal. I didn't want him to know I'd seen it. I locked the drawer again and slipped out of the room before he got out of the shower. That night, I barely slept. I just kept thinking about the journal, the flowers, the missing woman, and the cabin in the woods. And I realized something. Ryan wasn't keeping a secret. He was keeping a story. One that might still be unfinished. The next morning, I told Ryan I was driving into the city to visit a friend. He kissed me goodbye, told me to be safe, and reminded me to take a jacket, it might rain later. Just like any other day. Just like nothing was wrong. But instead of heading into the city, I waited until he pulled out of the driveway and then circled back. I grabbed a flashlight, gloves, and a crowbar I found in the shed, and I drove to the cabin. I parked a few houses down to avoid being seen and made my way through the woods on foot. The place looked abandoned, windows clouded with grime, vines swallowing the porch, but it didn't feel empty. It felt, waiting. The front door was locked, but the back wasn't. It opened with a whine so long and low it made my skin crawl. Inside, the air was stale and thick. Dust coated everything. A table, 2 chairs, a small bookshelf, and a cot. There was a metal kettle on the stove, rusted and clearly unused. Everything looked untouched, until I saw the calendar on the wall. This year's calendar. And one date circled over and over again, October 17th. Our anniversary. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint, from beneath the floorboards. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then I heard it again. Not a voice, exactly. Just a sound. Like someone breathing through their teeth. A whisper. A single word, drawn out, barely audible. It sounded like, Leah. I dropped the flashlight. When I picked it up, I was already on my knees, scanning the floor for gaps. In the corner, behind the bookshelf, I found it, another trapdoor. Just like the one in our basement. And when I lifted it, something inside me broke. Because what I saw was worse than anything I could have imagined. The space beneath the trapdoor wasn't just a crawl space, it was a full, concrete-walled room, dug into the ground like a bunker. I couldn't see everything from above, but the air that wafted up hit me like a wall, metallic, damp, old. I hesitated. Told myself to leave. But I climbed down anyway. It was colder than it had any right to be. My flashlight flickered as I scanned the room, bare walls, a small mattress on the floor, a metal tray, and something that made my blood run colder than the concrete under my feet. Scratch marks. Long, uneven scratch marks along the inside of the trapdoor. Fingernail marks. Like someone had tried to claw their way out. There was something else too, a wooden box. Smaller than the others. Just big enough to hold a few items. Inside was a plastic ID badge. Faded. The photo was smudged, but the name was clear. Leah Vaughn. And taped to the inside lid was a note. Written in Ryan's handwriting. Just 4 words. I never stopped looking. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely breathe. I stumbled back up the ladder and slammed the trapdoor shut, trying not to scream. I didn't understand. None of this made sense. Was Leah dead? Was she ever here? Was Ryan trying to find her, or hide her? That night, I didn't go home. I drove to a motel 2 towns over and locked the door behind me. I didn't sleep. Just stared at the ceiling, wondering how well you could really know someone after 6 years. Because now? I wasn't sure I knew Ryan at all. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I needed more than scratches and old photos, I needed something undeniable. Something that would prove I wasn't just making wild assumptions about the man I'd spent the last 6 years of my life with. So I did what I should have done weeks ago. I called Leah Vaughn's old landlord. Posed as a freelance writer doing a piece on local cold cases. It was a lie, but he didn't seem to care. Said he barely remembered her. She'd only lived there for about 7 months. Quiet girl. Always paid rent on time. Kept to herself. But then he said something that stopped me cold. He said she had a boyfriend. He didn't know much about him. Just that he used to pick her up after work sometimes. Early 30s, dark hair, drove a blue pickup truck with a dent in the side. The exact description of Ryan's old truck. The one he sold just before we met. That wasn't all. I tracked down an old friend of Leah's on Facebook. A woman named Clara. We messaged back and forth, and after a while, she agreed to a call. Her voice was cautious, heavy. Like she'd spent the last few years trying to forget something. I asked her if Leah ever talked about the guy she was dating. Clara said yes. And then she said something that made my stomach turn. She said Leah called him Ryan. A different last name, but the same first name. Same age. Same job field. Same hometown. He changed his last name. Ryan used to be someone else. Someone connected to a woman who disappeared. Clara said Leah had started pulling away near the end. That she seemed scared. Paranoid. Said someone had been following her home from work. That she was thinking of leaving town, changing her number, disappearing for a while. Then, just days later, she vanished. And now, somehow, her old boyfriend had a new name. And a new girlfriend. Me. I went home. I don't know why, exactly. Maybe to confront him. Maybe to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. But mostly, I needed to look him in the eyes and see what was really there. I needed to see if he knew I knew. When I walked through the door, Ryan was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables like nothing was wrong. He looked up, smiled like he always did, and said he was making my favorite, like that would smooth over the silence from the past 2 days. I asked him where he'd been on Thursday. He said work. I asked him if he remembered Leah Vaughn. He didn't even flinch. Just paused, wiped his hands on a towel, and said, no. Should I? That was when I knew. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Calm. Too calm. Like he'd been practicing that line for years. Like he'd erased her from his memory so thoroughly, he actually believed it. I watched him as he talked, pouring wine, setting the table, asking how I was feeling. He looked the same. Sounded the same. But he wasn't. He never had been. Everything in me wanted to scream. To throw the newspaper clipping in his face. To drag him to that cabin and show him the trapdoor and the scratches and the box. But I didn't. I played along. Ate dinner. Laughed when he made a joke. Because now I knew the truth. And I needed to stay close long enough to prove it. A week passed. I kept up the act, smiles, small talk, shared meals. Every night, Ryan kissed me goodnight like he always did, and every night, I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the moment I could breathe again. On the 8th night, I left. I told him I was going to a late yoga class. He kissed my forehead and said, drive safe. But I didn't go to yoga. I went back to the cabin. This time, I brought a shovel. I don't know why. Something about that calendar, the white tulips, the journal, it all felt unfinished. Like Leah had never truly left this place. Behind the cabin, the woods thicken. But there's a small clearing, maybe 50 yards back, where the grass grows thinner. I found it during my first visit, but didn't think much of it then. Now it felt like something else entirely. I started digging. It didn't take long. A few feet down, the shovel hit something solid. Wood. I kept going, frantic, dirt flying everywhere. And then I uncovered it. A box. Larger than the ones in the house, but handmade. Crude nails. Weathered wood. I pried it open with my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the flashlight. Inside was a blanket. And beneath it, bones. A human skeleton. Small. Fragile. And wrapped around one of the wrist bones? A charm bracelet. With a single silver tulip. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back, fell into the dirt, couldn't stop the shaking. Because now, it was real. Leah Vaughn never left town. She never disappeared. She was buried behind the cabin of the man I've lived with for 6 years. I called the police, told them everything. I gave them the journal, the photos, the clippings. I didn't stop shaking for days. Ryan was arrested 3 nights later. He never confessed. Just stared at me from the back of the police car like I'd betrayed him. But I didn't. I survived him. And now, when I close my eyes, I don't see the smiling man I once loved. I see what was behind that smile. And I will never, ever forget.